All right, well, let's get started. First, let me start off by welcoming everyone to tonight's Veirs Mill Road Bus Rapid Transit virtual open house. We're excited that you could make the time to spend with us this evening. We hope that this is informative and you get your questions answered. My name is Corey Pitts. I'm one of the BRT project managers at Montgomery County DOT within our Division of Transportation Engineering. You also see on the video here, he's our project manager for this specific project. So he'll be talking in a little bit about the project details. So first, just a couple of housekeeping items to orient everyone to how the Zoom works and to go over some of the controls. So, we have been using Zoom to do virtual open houses and virtual meetings over the course of the pandemic, but we are still learning, still working some of the bugs out. So, just bear with us. We have been finding that these have been working fairly well. But if there's an issue, you can shoot us a question, or if something's not working for you, we'll try and get that resolved. I am going to go over some of the basic controls to help you use the Zoom meeting format to interact during the presentation. I want to make note of, so Jennifer Owers, who you see also in the video, is kind of functioning as our facilitator tonight. So if you do have specific questions, we'd ask that you send them directly to her because it's difficult for Michael and I to monitor the chat while we're also giving the presentation. And I'll go over on the next couple slides how to send questions directly to Jennifer. I would note that we are recording tonight's meeting so that those people who couldn't attend tonight can follow up and watch it later. So if you don't wish to have your voice or likeness recorded, just keep in mind to keep your mic off and don't turn your camera on. Next slide. So everyone starts out in mute. This allows us to function the Q&A session a little bit more orderly. When we get to a point where we are taking questions and answers, we'll ask that you raise your hand and we'll go over that, how to do that in a little bit as well. And once you raise your hand, we'll unmute you and then you can ask your question. If you have called in by telephone and you're not dialing in or joining us by either a mobile device or through your computer, if you've just dialed in, you would hit *6 and then we can unmute you. We've also defaulted everyone's video camera to be off. This is really just to help us conserve on bandwidth. If we have 40 or more people turning on their cameras, it starts to strain everyone's home internet. So we just ask that you not turn your camera on and hopefully we can make this work for everyone. Next slide. So if you do have a question during the presentation or when we get to the Q&A sessions, you'll send that via the chat function. So at the bottom of the menu, you'll see a button that says chat. You'll click on that and it'll bring up a chat window. Now the default is that the chat goes to everyone. If you drop down on the menu where it says everyone, you can see that everyone's name is listed there. So if you search for Jennifer Owers, and she should be towards the top since she is one of the co-hosts, you can send your question directly to Jennifer and she is monitoring the chat and she'll either answer your question or get one of us to answer your question. So how do you raise your hand when section of the Q&A? So under participants, if you click on participants, it'll bring up a new window. And then next to your name, you can ask to raise your hand. You'll click the blue raise your hand button, and that will indicate to us that you have a question, and then we can unmute you. Again, if you've dialed in just by phone, you hit *9, and that will alert us that you have raised your hand, and we can unmute you that way. So to change your view, depending on how you have your view set up, you may see just us, or you may see lots of grayed out boxes for everyone that's attending that doesn't have their camera on. So if you click on the tab that says Start Video and select the video settings, There's a setting in there that says hide non-video participants. And if you check that box, it'll make all those gray boxes go away and you'll just see the video of Michael, myself, and Jennifer. Again, we do ask that participants that aren't speaking keep their cameras off so that we can conserve on bandwidth. Thanks. So the purpose of tonight's open house is to provide an overview of the transit improvements along the Veirs Mill Road corridor, to review the project schedule and budget, to solicit comments and get feedback on the details of the BRT stations and the service plans from those of you who are in attendance tonight. And really to get the most out of this meeting, and we're going to go through a presentation of the work that's been done to date. Please ask questions about that work. Those questions help inform the next pieces of work for us, and we'll have details on how to provide comments at the end of the presentation so that you can share your thoughts with us at the end. So to start things off, we're just going to start with a quick introduction to BRT. So this is just a short little video, and then we'll jump into the presentation.
BRT, Bus Rapid Transit, a comfortable, reliable, new transit option for Montgomery County. BRT will have new walkways and stations where you can wait comfortably, view real-time travel information, and pay your fare before boarding. BRT's reliable service keeps you moving with features like getting green light priority signaling. BRT will be a new transit option for Montgomery County. BRT is a new type of vehicle. It's like a train on rubber tires, often having its own lanes on busy roads with fewer stops so you can get where you need to go quickly. BRT vehicles have Wi-Fi and power outlets so you can get a head start on your day during your commute. Riding the BRT will get you out of traffic. One BRT vehicle can take up to 90 cars off the road. More BRT riders means less traffic. Less cars on the road means a better commute for riders and drivers. And BRT is good for business because BRT not only gets workers to their jobs, but attracts new jobs and business along BRT routes. BRT is cost-effective. It uses the roads we already have and adjusts them to make room for BRT. BRT is in cities across the U.S., including right next door in Northern Virginia. BRT, a smart new transit option for Montgomery County, making trips around the county more comfortable and convenient, leaving you more time to do the things you enjoy. Get on board BRT. BRT.
Great. So let's jump right in. So just to reinforce some of the elements that you saw in the video, what is BRT? It is a comfortable and reliable transit option that we are proposing for Montgomery County. Bus Rapid Transit, or BRT, does use the existing street. Oftentimes we try to give it its own lane on busy roads so that it can get by congestion or bypass the congestion. It does make fewer stops than the existing local bus network, so that hopefully we can speed up the service itself. Just a couple of updates on where we are in terms of bus rapid transit in the county. So the US 29 Flash project, which would operate on the Colesville corridor between Silver Spring and Burtonsville, just opened up yesterday, so we're pretty excited about that. So if you get a chance to travel the US 29 corridor, take a look at the stations and the buses traveling, or take the service yourself. So I'm just going to touch on some of the BRT features. So in terms of features, we are talking about upgraded vehicles. So this is an image of the Flash bus that is operating on US 29. They are articulated, so they have more room within them. They also have 3 doors to facilitate faster boarding. We can construct the stations to be level with the bus so that it's easy on and easy off. If you're in a wheelchair, if you have a stroller, if you're rolling on a bike, you can easily roll on and off the bus. If you're stepping onto the bus, no more stepping up and down, and no more having to lower the bus. The services are frequent. and more reliable. So we're talking, 10 minutes or less in the peak period, and oftentimes 15 minutes or less in the off-peak periods. Where we can get them, we do provide dedicated lanes or at least queue jumps to bypass traffic. A number of the projects have pedestrian and bike improvements, as well as bike improvements on the buses themselves. So no more having to load your bike on the front of the bus. The bike racks are actually in the rear of the bus, so you just roll your bike onto the bus and install it in the rack, and off you go. We do install traffic signal priority at certain intersections to help facilitate the bus moving along the corridor. And our stations have weather protection as well as off-board fare payments. So you'll pay your fare at the station as opposed to on the bus itself. Again, this helps boarding process. So when the bus arrives, all 3 doors open. Anyone can enter and exit through any door they wish. They don't all have to queue up at the front door like they do with the local bus service. So I'm going to turn this over to Michael now, who's going to talk more specifically about the Veirs Mill BRT project.
Thank you, Corey. I'm Michael Mitchell. I'm the project manager for this BRT project on Veirs Mill Road and Maryland 355. What you're looking at is the overall map of the project showing the BRT along Veirs Mill Road. To give you round numbers, roughly 6 miles along Veirs Mill Road, and about 1.5 miles, 1.6 miles on Rockville Pike, Maryland 355, going to Montgomery College. It's going to serve the corridor that you see, Veirs Mill Road and Maryland 355. Next slide. As Corey indicated, the BRT will use the existing roads where there are available shoulders, or in some places we have, or we will facilitate, we will create, use the existing right turn lanes or dedicated lanes that the BRT will use. In other places, it will be sharing the traffic on Veirs Mill Road and 355 with the rest of the traffic. Next. Hopefully you're seeing the images that are moving as the introduction video and Corey indicated. Right now we are looking at service intervals, the bus intervals during the rush hour in the morning and the afternoon to be somewhere between 5 to 10 minutes, and in the non-peak hours every 10 to 15 minutes. We will use what is called TSP, or Transit Signal Priority, at 9 of the intersections. What TSP is, as the bus is approaching the intersection, if the traffic signal is already green, it will tell the traffic signal, hey, stay green a few more seconds so I can get through. Or if the signal is already red, it will tell the signal, hey, can you turn green a little bit sooner, so kind of speed things up for us. But I want to stress, this does not affect the total operation of that intersection or the whole corridor, and it is not the same thing that the ambulances or fire engines, the emergency vehicles use. Those are different. They do get priority. This is basically trying to squeeze where capacity is available through each intersection where we have TSP. That's what the TSP is, and what it's going to do, it will reduce travel time for the BRT and provide a more reliable service. Another thing that we are using is called queue jumps. As you can see in the video image below, there are 3 lanes for through traffic. They're waiting to go through the intersection. We are using what is the right turn lane. It will be exclusively for the BRT. At some intersection, it will be shared with vehicles who are turning right. But instead of waiting behind those 3 lanes where the cars are stacked up waiting to go through the signal, the BRT bus gets its own lane, queue jump lane, to go through the intersection faster. Both of these, the TSP and the queue jumps, it really provides a faster service than the typical bus, like right on that you're familiar with. Next slide. Where we are at the project schedule, we are right now reaching the very end of planning design. Concept design. In our business, we call that 5 to 10% design. By middle of November, I would say we should be done with the preliminary design, the planning phase, the concept design phase. We have already begun the preliminary design, which takes us to 35% stage. We anticipate we will be done with preliminary design by late fall of 2021, roughly about a year from now. Right now, we are not funded for final design or construction. We are only funded to the end of preliminary design, but we believe we will receive funding to continue on to final design and construction. If we receive funding, we will start final design in late 2021. It should take about 2.5 years to do final design, and then we will go to construction, which itself would take approximately 2.5 years. So if everything goes as planned, we get funding and everything moves along smoothly, by middle of 2026, the BRT on Veirs Mill Road 355 would be operational. Next slide. The background for this project. This project was initially studied by Maryland Department of Transportation State Highway Administration, SHA as we call it. They did a study and they finished up in 2018, and they came up with various alternatives and recommendations along Veirs Mill Road. Next slide. What that study came up with, among the various alternatives, one was alternative 2 and one was alternative 3. When they were presented to the county council, Montgomery County Council, they opted for a alternative, kind of between the two, and we call it alternative 2.5. Alternative 2.5, it keeps the infrastructure improvements that were part of alternative 2. Those are the stations where they are, or the number of stations, and the queue jumps. And it keeps the operational improvements, such as how frequently the buses run, so forth, of alternative 3. As I said, county council picked alternative 2.5, but alternative 3 has been retained as like a master plan, as a long-term option, that it's more robust if in the future they want to, you know, if there's funding and the need for it, it could be pursued at a later date. The planning, design, and construction of alternative 2.5 is now moving forward by Montgomery County, by us. Next slide. As far as the background, what the study looked at was the BRT stations, the number of stations, their locations, the queue jump locations, what kind of service plans would be offered, what are the property impacts, what are environmental impacts. There's some forecasting for ridership and traffic analysis. There was an estimation of the total cost of the project. And finally, what we call station access. I will talk about that in more detail in a few minutes, but basically that is how we get pedestrian or cyclists to each station. I'll talk about that more in a few minutes. Next. The need for this project, you know, system connectivity. It provides high quality express connection east-west through the counties, a transit connection that currently is not really available between the two metro stations in Rockville and Wheaton. This will do the job very nicely, in fact. Mobility. Right now, there is traffic congestion on Veirs Mill Road. Local buses are typically delayed by 15 minutes or more. And all of this, you know, causes to be unpredictable or increased travel times, both for mass transit and for the regular traffic that uses that corridor. The demand. There is a pretty high transit ridership on this corridor already today. And there are plans, both by BOMATA and others, as far as transit-oriented development at both metro rail stations in Rockville and Wheaton. So this kind of fits in very nicely with that. And livability. What this project does, it creates a more reliable and accessible transportation network, east-west within the heart of the county, and it provides more choices for the users, and it definitely improves access as far as to housing, to employment, or to other destinations, shops and restaurants and so forth. Next slide. The station access that I talked about, what it is within a half mile of each station, we are looking at what improvements we need to make to get people to the stations on foot, or if they are choosing to ride their bicycles. My own term for it is feeders. This is what feeds every station. And to do that, we have looked at various master plans, other studies for pedestrian safety or pedestrian or cyclist improvements. We have sifted through all of those. We have come up with, what fits, what would be a good idea for this project. And we have coordinated with agencies within DOT and outside of the county agencies to find out what station access projects we should be looking at. But as I said, we are in concept design right now. So if you will, this is kind of right now bird's eye view. As we are finishing up preliminary design or final design, we will have more robust or detailed information as far as what we are looking at for each station in terms of feeders or station access. And obviously we will present that to you in the future open houses. Next. This is an overall map of the project. I'm going to turn it over to Christine Sutkowski. Christine will go over the station locations and the queue jumps.
Thank you, Michael. So I'll just have to share my screen to take a closer look. And Jen, maybe could you just confirm that my screen is being shared?
Yes, we can see it. If you move your mouse, though, I can confirm that it's live. Yep, there it goes.
Great, thank you. So during this portion of the presentation, I'll just take a brief closer look at the Veirs Mill Road BRT corridor and the proposed station locations. So this is the overview map that Michael was showing of the project corridor. The proposed flash bus route is shown in the orange color, and it traverses the entire length of Veirs Mill Road and that short segment of Maryland 355. As Michael mentioned, it's a total length of approximately a little over 7.5 miles and goes from Wheaton on the east end to Rockville on the west end. The dots shown on this map represent either a proposed station location, which is shown in blue, or a proposed queue jump location only, which is shown in green, or a location with both a station and queue jump improvement, which is shown in the blue and green color. For those of you who may have attended the open houses about the Veirs Mill BRT planning study a few years ago, that study that Michael was mentioning, you may notice that a few of the proposed station locations have changed based on further evaluation and comments received during that time. So there are 12 proposed stations located along the route and 2 standalone queue jump locations that allow the bus to bypass traffic congestion and move more quickly. The BRT stations are spaced about 3/4 of a mile apart on average, and I'm going to walk through the current BRT station and improvement locations by zooming in and out of this map. And then in a few minutes, Michael will describe the station features and the look of the BRT stations shortly. So we'll start on the west side of the corridor, where the bus route extends along a little over 1 mile segment of Maryland 355. The western terminus station is located at Montgomery College. It's right within the campus, just off of Maryland 355. The BRT station would be located near the existing bus stops that are along South Campus Drive. Those are the bus stops for Ride-On and WMATA routes. And in addition to serving the student population at the college, this location would allow for people to transfer between other bus routes. The second stop along Maryland 355 will be near the Rockville Metro Station. This is at the intersection of Rockville Pike and Park Road. And at this location, the platforms will be located along the curb on Rockville Pike, very close to the entrance to the metro station. And I should note that our team is working with the design team for the Maryland 355 BRT study to make sure that we coordinate on the station locations that are along Rockville Pike. And under this concept, the buses would not enter directly into the metro kiss and ride lot, but would stay along Rockville Pike. And this station location allows people to transfer to or from the Metro Red Line and other bus routes within the kiss and ride lot, and then also provides access to the Rockville Town Center. Continuing southeast, now we're along Veirs Mill Road itself. The first standalone improvement location is at the intersection of Veirs Mill Road and Maryland 28. This is a queue jump in the westbound direction going towards Rockville. that's proposed at this location. And as Michael mentioned, that allows the bus to enter, in this case, the existing right turn only lane and jump ahead of the through traffic to save a few seconds of travel time. The third BRT station in Rockville is located at the intersection of Veirs Mill Road and Edmonston Drive. A queue jump lane is proposed in the eastbound direction that goes towards Wheaton, and that would operate similar to what I described at Maryland 28. The station platforms would be located along the curb between Veirs Mill Road and the service roads and would serve the surrounding residential neighborhoods. They'd also be located close to the existing bus stops so that riders could transfer between bus routes if needed. The next set of stations span the boundary of the city of Rockville, which is generally right here at Twin Brook Parkway. There is a proposed station located at the intersection of Atlantic Avenue and Veirs Mill Road. The station platforms there would be located along the curb on Veirs Mill Road in front of the Twin Brook Shopping Center. And that allows users to serve shopping trips or users can get on and off the bus from nearby residences. And at this location, the BRT would utilize the existing right turn only lanes for queue jumps. The next station and set of queue jump locations is located at Veirs Mill Road and Twin Brook Parkway. The platforms would be located along the curb on Veirs Mill Road and would serve, again, those nearby residential neighborhoods. The platforms would be located near the existing bus stops to allow riders to transfer to other routes that go northbound and southbound along Twin Brook Parkway. The next station and set of queue jumps is at Veirs Mill Road and Aspen Hill Road. The BRT station platforms are located along the edge of the shoulder in each direction on Veirs Mill, just like the existing bus stops are today. And in this case, the existing shoulders would be repurposed as dedicated bus lanes for the queue jumps at this traffic signal. And the station location here would serve the surrounding residential neighborhoods in Aspen Hill. Moving east, the next BRT station platforms are located at Robindale Drive, the intersection of Veirs Mill Road and Robindale. Both platforms would be located along the edge of the existing shoulder. And similar to the concept at Aspen Hill Road, the existing shoulders would be repurposed as dedicated bus lanes for the queue jumps at the traffic signal. The station at Robindale would serve the surrounding residences, and that includes the Rock Creek Terrace apartments, which are just on the south side of Veirs Mill Road here. The next standalone improvement is for queue jumps at the intersection of Veirs Mill Road and Parkland Drive. Queue jump lanes are proposed in both directions, in the eastbound and westbound directions, at this location to allow the bus to enter either the existing shoulder or the existing right turn only lane and jump ahead of through traffic, again, to save a few seconds of travel time. Continuing to move east, the next BRT station is located at the intersection of Veirs Mill Road and Randolph Road. The platform in the eastbound direction heading towards Wheaton would be along the curb in front of the Randolph Crossing Shopping Center, right near the existing bus stop that's there today. And the platform in the westbound direction going towards Rockville would be along the curb on Veirs Mill, right in front of the McDonald's in the northeast corner of the intersection. And this station would serve the surrounding businesses and shopping centers that are along Randolph Road and Veirs Mill here, and residences that are also close to the shopping centers. And the improvements at this location also include construction of a new lane in the westbound direction that would serve as a bus and right turn only lane. And then the next BRT station is located at the intersection of Veirs Mill Road and Connecticut Avenue. Both station platforms here would be located along the curb on Veirs Mill Road, again, close to the existing bus stops. And queue jumps in both directions would also be included under our current design concept. The station here would serve the nearby residential neighborhoods and allow riders to transfer to other routes along Connecticut Avenue. On to the east end of the corridor. The next BRT station is located at the intersection of Veirs Mill Road and Norris Drive. And a new traffic signal is being designed at this intersection by the State Highway Administration. And we are working with them to make sure that our station platforms are compatible with the new signal. The platforms would be located along the curb on Veirs Mill Road. And this location in particular would serve both the nearby residences and Newport Mill Middle School and Einstein High School on the south side of Veirs Mill. At this location, the rightmost lane in the eastbound direction heading toward Wheaton is currently marked as a bus-only lane today, and the BRT would use that lane along this segment of Veirs Mill Road. Moving closer to Wheaton, the last BRT station before the Metro is located at the intersection of Veirs Mill Road and University Boulevard. Both platforms here would be located along the curb on Veirs Mill Road, again, not too far from the existing bus stops. And this location provides access to the many businesses within the downtown Wheaton Triangle area, including the Wheaton Mall, close to Georgia Avenue. And in the westbound direction, the BRT bus would use that same existing bus-only lane that's marked today as a queue jump lane through the traffic signal at University Boulevard. And then on to the last and terminus station on the east end of the corridor, which is at the Wheaton Metro Station. This BRT station is proposed to replace one of the existing bus bays within the bus loop that's located right at the entrance to the Wheaton Metro between Veirs Mill Road and Georgia Avenue. The BRT would also use the bus loop as a turnaround point so that it could continue service northbound on Veirs Mill Road. This location for the platform, of course, allows users to have direct access to the Metro Red Line, but also to the other bus routes that are within the bus loop here. And I should note that our team coordinated with both WMATA and transit services at Montgomery County to select this location, and we'll continue to work with them through our next stages of design. So that was a high-level overview, and now I'll turn it back over to Michael and the PowerPoint presentation to go over some details of the features at each BRT station.
Thank you, Christine. I'll just wait for Scott to load up the PowerPoint and I'll continue
on. Before we get back into the presentation, we have a question from Carol. Michael, she asks, what will be done to alleviate the traffic backup at Connecticut and Veirs Mill? Currently going towards Rockville can take 3 traffic lights to get through.
Well, it's interesting Carol is asking about that specific intersection. For one thing, not only because of the queue jump, for other features that are there, such as cyclists and pedestrians, of all the locations that we are looking at making geometric improvements, that one probably has the most significant geometric improvement. So we are definitely looking at that intersection in how to make the operation of that intersection better when BRT comes. But I do want to reiterate that this is a state route, Maryland 586. If in today's conditions you're experiencing traffic delays, we will definitely pass this on through our contacts to SHA, but you could do so to let them know of the status quo, because our project, even if it gets funded, it would be a few years before it's constructed and goes through, and the improvements that I'm talking about will come to fruition. But as far as our project, we are definitely taking a close look at, I would say, significant geometric improvements at that intersection. But in terms of traffic operations today, I would suggest that you contact SHA to see what they can do to make improvements to the cycles, the signal cycles at that intersection. Next slide. This is a rendering of a generic station. And you guys keep me honest. I should, if I forget, there are 12 features that I'm going to talk about, and Scott will point to them with his cursor. Yes, exactly. As I go through them one by one. The first thing is the marker or the totem. That's the blue one that you see that designates this is the BRT station. Now you see a whole bunch of other features. Not all of these would be present at every station. That's because of physical constraints, or there might be significant utilities where we couldn't fit everything in there. But this would be a station that had it all. The next one would be the canopies. They are kind of unique, I would say. They provide protection from the rain and the sun. They provide some shade. Next, when we go to the next slide, I will show you that they are actually illuminated. They look pretty nice when the lights are on. The next thing that you would see surrounding the station are screens that provide some protection from the wind or other elements. Then the next feature are lean rails. So people who want to stand while they're going through their phone messages and such, they can lean against the rail. For people who want to sit, there are benches. So there are seating available. The next one is a static map, which typically should be on the same station marker, on the totem. This is similar if you have ever taken the metro, which I would guess most people have. That shows basically the whole route and then what are the next stations ahead, depending on which direction you're going, whether you're going in the west or east direction on Veirs Mill BRT. And there are ticket vending machines where you can buy monthly passes or so forth, or single-use passes. And then there are ticket validators. They're kind of to the left, exactly. And that's where you can validate your tickets. As the Corey mentioned, or the generic video you saw at the beginning, that's one of the features of BRT, where you purchase your tickets before you get on the bus and you validate it before you get on the bus. So that kind of speeds things up. That's one feature of BRT. The next one that you see is the raised platform. If you take a look on the right side of the image, the curb exactly, that curb today is what we call the standard curb. It's about 6.5 inches high. It will transition to a elevated, about 12 inches platform. That's the raised platform we were talking about. When the buses pull next to it, it will be level with people who are waiting at the station to get on the bus. So the bus doesn't have to, decompress to come lower or go higher. So that's what we call level boarding. That's what that shows. The next item is, if you look to the left of the image, you'll see a couple of people on bicycles. That's just a symbolic representation that we will have bicycle racks for people who reach the station and want to park their bicycles. Some of the stations may even have capital bike share or Montgomery County bike share programs next to each station, but that's what that represents there. Next, if you look to the right, you will see landscaping. In some cases, it will be just that, landscaping, but in most cases, to the untrained eye, it may look like landscaping, but it's stormwater management. That is where we are treating the impervious area of the station or the nearby sidewalk within the stormwater management facility, which would be landscape. So that's another feature of the station. Finally, it may not really be visible in this rendering, is going to be an art component. It might be mosaic that we put on the ground, or some mural or pictures that are hung somewhere on the station. And this is where I call it audience or public participation. We welcome you all's input on as far as the art. What we anticipate, every station would have like a unique art feature of its own. Okay, next slide. This is an actual station that was under construction. It doesn't have all the features, which is why I used the rendering. As you can see, the columns for the canopies are illuminated, and also underneath the canopies are illuminated. You can see the screen in the back and the lean rails, and also the benches, the totem, and the map. So that's what an actual station. This was during construction that you can see. Next slide.
Michael, before we get into the benefits and costs, there's a question from Mariela Garcia. I'm sorry, Mariela Garcia Colberg. She's asking, how is MCDOT going to deal with enforcement issues, such as preventing cars from entering dedicated sections or bus lanes? she knows DDOT has had some issues with that.
Well, I'll make one thing clear. The Department of Transportation itself is not in the enforcement business. We work closely with our colleagues in the police department. Obviously, this happens in other jurisdictions. We are aware of it. Some people, they think for a few seconds they can sneak into the rightmost lane to the dedicated BRT lane, then jump back out. But if this happens to become a pattern or a habit, we can always coordinate with our colleagues in the police department. And as we, once this, we just opened up US 29, we're going to take a close look. I don't think that has as many, that doesn't have dedicated lanes, but once we open up Veirs Mill, if this becomes an issue, as you're aware, technology has improved so much, we can have cameras or other monitoring systems to keep track of this thing and take action about it. I hope that answered the question. So I'm going to move on. As far as the project, we forecast that in 2040, that's roughly about 20 years from now, 15 years or so from when it opens up, there would be 6,400 boardings. More than 40% of those 2,700 would be new riderships, new boardings. This is going to improve the transit reliability. The dedicated lanes that I talked about and Christine covered in her presentation, transit signal priority and the queue jumps, all of these boil down to providing a more reliable and faster transit service, which in turn will improve also the travel times for car and trucks on this corridor. Next slide. I'm not going to go through each number alone, but individually, but overall to design this project and acquire the needed right-of-way and buy the necessary buses, the new buses, the total price tag right now where we are at the planning stage is about 76 million. And we forecast right now the annual operating budget will be just shy of 4 million each year. Obviously, as we get into preliminary design and especially at final design, we will have more accurate numbers or more detailed numbers at that, and we will update that. But right now, we feel pretty comfortable with these numbers. And as I mentioned, US 29 just opened, so we use some of the numbers as far as like the bus costs, the cost of each bus from that study for our project. Next slide.
Michael, if I can interrupt, we have another question about the actual operation or service. Joanne Bellamy asks, will BRT cause a reduction in the buses that are currently service the Veirs Mill route? And if so, what are you going to do to ensure that adequate service availability remains, since there are numerous seniors who rely on the current transportation and won't be near a BRT boarding station?
Well, that's a very good question. Actually, one of the things we will be looking at would be as far as coordination with all the existing transit services, especially the ones that are coming from what I call side streets, but definitely what's on this corridor today. Yes, we will coordinate very closely. We are already coordinating closely with our colleagues in the transit division with Ride-On and so forth to ensure that we actually improve the transit service on this corridor and don't cause any issues for people. But as I said, this is something we will look much more closely in the next design stages than what we are doing today. We are only at concept or planning design stage today. As far as the next steps, as I mentioned, we are in planning or concept design. I anticipate that by middle of next month, middle of November, we will finish concept design, and we got a couple of steps left. We have already begun preliminary design, and one of the other things that we have started working on is to apply for federal funding or some support for this project as we move forward. And as you can see in the next bullet is the question that I just answered. We will evaluate the local bus service that's already there and what we will be interfacing with. And obviously, just like tonight, we are going to meet with stakeholders, with the public, to provide to you all the information we have as far as the design as we progress forward, and to get feedback from you all as we move forward towards final design.
Michael, we have another question about budget. from Amy Swanson. She asked if federal funding is not received, will the project be paused?
Would you like me to jump in and take that one, Michael?
That's fine. Go ahead, Corey.
So right now we're currently funded just through the preliminary design stage, as Michael indicated. There will need to be a funding request made at the conclusion of this stage to get the funding for final design. That would come all from Montgomery County sources or local sources. We are in the process of entering into project development or looking to enter into project development with the Federal Transit Administration for the actual construction costs. We believe that the project is a competitive project, but obviously, if we're accounting for federal sources and we don't get those federal sources, those monies would have to be found elsewhere. So it could delay the construction of the project, but it's a little premature to say kind of whether we'll get those sources and when the timing of that will occur. But we are actively, while we're working on the design piece, also looking at the next stages of funding and budgeting for the project to move forward.
Thank you, Corey. Next slide. The next steps, there is a comment card. What you see in green highlighted below is the website. You can access it, and we encourage you to provide us with any comments you have regarding what you've seen. If you have any questions after the meeting, you want to reach me, my email is there, michael.mitchell@montgomerycountymd.gov. Send me an email. I'll be more than happy to find you the answer. If I don't know it, I have a very good team helping me out with this project, so we'll get back to you as quickly as we can with any questions you have. Okay. We encourage you to stay connected. If you want a specific presentation for your community, let us know, such as a homeowners association or such, or any other organization. Just ask us, we will make arrangements and we will come before you, probably virtually. As you understand, we are in the middle of a pandemic still, but we will make it happen. There will be future open houses as we move to preliminary and final design. Just like you heard about tonight, we will inform you, we will reach out, and we'll invite you to come back and see what we have developed, further design, and provide us with your input. And I encourage you to stay engaged. Contact us if you have any suggestion as far as the whole service or each of the stations. Let us know, and we will take all the comments and we try to incorporate it into the design as we move forward to final design. Next. There you have it. If you have any specific questions, just send the question to Jennifer.
Hi, Michael. We did get one. This is from Patricia Price. In 2005, the Montgomery County Historical Society gave the Hammond Wood subdivision a grant to erect an historic marker recognizing Hammond Wood as a historic place. The marker was installed at Pendleton Drive and Veirs Mill. Last year, I had an email exchange with a staff member from Montgomery Planning who said the BRT might take the land the historic marker now occupies depending on how the BRT is constructed. Could I get clarification on whether or not this is true?
Well, first of all, thank you so very much for letting us know. I will confess, I was not aware. I am not familiar with that very specific location on this project, but I promise you we will take a close look. And one of the things that you saw, one of the things, I call it hoops, that we have to jump through is both impact to any historic property or environmental features. So we will definitely take a close look. And if you leave us your email, I'll get back to you. Our team will look into it and we'll get back to you. I cannot tell you, because I'm not familiar with that location, whether we are impacting it, and if we are, what steps we will take.
Jennifer, do we want to take the other question from Mariella?
Oh, yes. Sorry about that. Mariella asks, do we see major impacts to the project from COVID-19? Such as transit ridership down overall? Does Montgomery County have much money, or are we assuming that everything will be somewhat back to normal in 2024?
So hopefully we're back to something that is more akin to normal by 2024. Yes, transit ridership is down, but we think that that is a short-term issue. Obviously, with people staying home and not traveling as much, and staying out of the public, that's going to happen as our traffic levels. But we would expect those levels to resume to normal levels, as we come out of this. This is a long-term project. This isn't something that we're doing just for tomorrow. So we think that travel will get back to near normal levels or normal levels going forward. And as the county continues to develop, we'll only need to move more people around in the future. So, we're taking the long look at this in terms of the project, and not just thinking about kind of the short term or the near term horizon. Funding is, going to be an issue, and obviously the county is working through those details and what the impacts of COVID mean, which is why we are looking at sources like federal sources and other sources to help fund these projects. And those are being worked on by the other members of the BRT team who aren't here with us this evening, who are more focused on the programmatic pieces of the BRT program.
Thanks, Corey. We have another question from Amy about specifically how people are to bring bikes onto the buses and how that works, that process.
Corey, you want to take that?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question. I had a home interruption.
Amy is asking how bikes are brought onto the bus, whether or not that will slow it down, and what's the process of bringing your bike onto the bus? Is it the same as with ride-on, etc.?
With the current ride-on buses, you have to step off the curb and lower that heavy rack down and then lift your bike up onto it. With the BRT vehicles, the way they're currently designed is there is a rack at the rear of the bus. So what will happen, or what we envision happening, and should be happening as the flash service has started on US 29, is when the bus pulls up, you'll wait towards the rear door. So there are 3 doors on the bus. You'll wait near the rear door. The door will open. You'll enter in that rear door and just roll your bike on. And with that near level station platform, you won't have to lift your bike up onto the bus. You'll just kind of roll straight onto the bus and then put your bike in the rack there at the rear of the bus. And when the bus arrives at your destination, you'll take it off the rack and wheel off. We envision this to be a much smoother and faster operation than having to step down and off the curb, which I know some BRT systems still require the users to do. So we're hopeful that this actually speeds up the boarding process for those carrying their bike with them.
Great. And then we also have a question from Jamie Parker about how queue jumps will be installed. They ask, the queue jump does not mean you will widen the road. Is that correct? The road will stay the same?
I will take it. Well, in some places we are widening. It's basically for the uninitiated, it will look like, if you're driving your car, it will look like a right turn lane. It might be longer than a typical right turn lane, but it is meant to be used by the BRT. In most locations, it will be exclusively for the BRT, but in some intersections, it would be shared with the vehicles who are going to use to turn right. So that's what the queue jump lane is.
Thanks, Michael. And then we have a question from Judy. Does the project include land acquisition in sections of the corridor? Yes,
there is what we call property acquisition. When SHA concluded their study, they had what we call displacement. In fact, they showed that they would have impacts to some properties where we would have to buy the house itself. The occupants would have to relocate. We have worked very hard to eliminate all of those residential displacements, but the corridor itself in some places is not wide enough. What we call the public right-of-way, the public land within which the road, the sidewalks, and so forth are currently located. In some places, it is not wide enough for all the improvements that we are proposing. So for that reason, there are places where we're going to do property acquisition.
Great. And then we have a question from Luz Nazarino. Approximately how much would it cost to ride the BRT from University Boulevard to Montgomery County Station? Or I'm sorry, Montgomery College Station.
Corey, you want to take a stab at it?
Sure. So the cost for Flash or riding the Flash is the same as the local bus service. So that's currently $2. Actually, it's currently free because the county is not collecting fares on the buses, but a decision was made that the Flash service would cost the same as the local bus service. It's not like the metro system where you actually pay depending on the distance that you travel. So it's just one flat rate to ride the route.
I just want to interject. These are all very good questions, and I'm encouraged that you guys, if I may say so, are paying attention or engaged. So thank you so much.
Oh, another question from Amy. Will we be able to use Metro smart cards to pay our fares?
Yep. On that rendering that Michael showed you, those fare validators are where you would tap your smart trip card. So if it's not like a fare gate like you have at the metro station, but if you're paying with a smart trip card, you would tap your smart trip card on those fare validators. It would deduct the fare from your card, and then you would board the bus. And then in terms of, I'm maybe jumping ahead a little bit, but in terms of how we ensure that people are paying their fare, there would be random fare inspectors that would be floating around on the vehicles or on the platforms, and they would ask to see your smart trip card and would have a small handheld device that they could check to confirm that you have paid your fare, or if you paid with cash and got a ticket that had been validated, they would validate that ticket for you.
Great. We have a question from Jeff about lead times and bus frequencies. I know we touched on it a little bit, but could you go over that again and have those been determined?
Well, we're going to fine tune that, Jeff, as we get into preliminary and especially final design. But right now, we are looking at intervals of 5 to 10 minutes during the peak hours, the morning and afternoon rush hours, and somewhere in 10 to 15 minute range for the non-peak hours.
Yeah, I will say generally we're kind of working with maximums. So there's a time limit that we wouldn't exceed in terms of frequency, but in terms of the exact specific frequencies, those will be details that our transit friends over at Ride On will fine tune and finalize as the service gets closer to operation.
We've got another question from Denise. Is there a transfer for local buses, or does one have to pay for BRT and then pay again for the bus?
So I'm going to assume that she's talking about transferring between buses. So I believe the way the current structure is, and I thought I saw Deanna in attendance, who was one of our transit planners. She may have left, but I believe transfers are currently free between the local service to Flash or to between other local services. So you would get at least one free transfer, and I think beyond that, you'd be paying a new fare. But the transfer rules would apply the same as they do for the current ride-on system.
Awesome. We've got a question from Captain J. What type of fuel do the buses use? Are there problems with the regen cycles? How are you measuring emissions along the route?
Great question. So the first buses that were purchased that are operating on the 29 corridor are clean diesel buses. There was a lot of thought given into whether we should go the electric bus route at the time that we were procuring those buses, which was roughly 2-ish years ago. But we were following some news that was coming out of Albuquerque. They recently completed a BRT system and went with an all-electric fleet. And there were, if you Google Albuquerque and electric buses, you'll find all kinds of articles and news about all the issues that they had. So in terms of 40-foot buses, which are more akin to the local buses, we are starting to introduce some electric buses into the fleet. And that technology is pretty well proven. The articulated buses are a little bit behind the 40-foot buses, so we didn't feel comfortable going that route for the very first service. But as anyone who's followed the county executive and his statements regarding vehicles in the county, he's very interested in moving the entire county fleet to be as much an electric fleet as possible. So I would imagine that as we move forward and expand the Flash fleet and just the ride-on fleet in general, that you're going to start to see more electric buses being purchased.
And we have another question from Luz about the property acquisition. When will the homeowners be notified if they will be affected?
I'll respond to that. Property acquisition phase is done once we complete final design. So I want to first reiterate that we are only right now funded to the end of preliminary design. If we get funded to go to final design and construction, then obviously we'll do property acquisition. What will happen at the conclusion of final design, we will turn over the property needs to our colleagues in our property acquisition section. And at that time, they will bring on board, no pun intended, independent appraisers to place a value on the property, the land, the real estate that we need for this project. The appraiser puts a value on the land that we need, and then an offer is made to the property owners. Based on the current schedule, if we get funded, that probably is going to be about 3 years, 3.5 years from now. So that would be the answer.
But I would note that as we advance the design, you'll see the design details and how it relates to the current right-of-way. So if you are a property owner along the corridor, you will see, earlier than that, whether your property could potentially be affected. Now, we don't know, as Michael said, when the state started this work, there were displacements that were shown, and so far we've been able to pull back those and reduce them. And that's what we do as we continue to kind of sharpen our pencils and refine the design, is that, we look to try and reduce those property impacts as much as possible. So those will continue to evolve as the project advances, but you'll be able to see those details as we work through the design.
If there are no other questions, I want to thank you all again for joining us. And you have my email. I'll repeat it again, michael.mitchell@montgomerycountymd.gov. You can send me your questions after the meeting, and we'll be more than happy to respond to you. And the website you saw, there's information there. Thank you, Jennifer. And you can contact us if you want a separate presentation to your community, to your HOA. We'll be more than happy to arrange that. But thank you again for joining us. I personally really appreciate all the input and the keen interest that you all showed, and I could tell from the questions that we received. If there are no other questions, and unless Corey has anything to add, I wish you all a very good night.
I thought Jennifer said that there might have been one more. Do you have another question?
Yes, 2 more just came in. We've got one from Jamie. Asking about the landowners. Do owners have to sell, or is this an eminent domain?
I will answer that. The process, I'll quickly go through the process for property acquisition in general for any transportation project. If we need a property, real estate, if you will, from any property owner, as I said, we will have independent appraisers to come up with the fair market value for that land that we need, whether it's residential or commercial, industrial, whatever, and an offer is made. Obviously, the owner can accept it or not accept it. And my colleagues in the property acquisition will try to negotiate with the property owner, but if they do not reach an agreement, there is the term that you use is eminent domain. That's a very broad term. We call it quick take. It will go to quick take. Any quick take has to be approved by the county council. If it is approved, what they would do is the land that is needed for the project is acquired, and the fair market value is placed in an escrow account. The owner can accept it. The negotiations are over. If not, the project will move forward. The land has been acquired because it is in the public interest. It is serving the public. then there is negotiations as far as what compensations may be beyond what has been placed in the escrow subsequently. That is the procedure. Most of the time, and I don't want to speak for them, but based on my own experience, and I've been in this business for quite a number of years, most of the times my colleagues are pretty good. They do reach consensus and an agreement with the property owner. Next question.
We've got one from Jeff. Will the bicycle and pedestrian improvements around the stations follow Montgomery County and Rockville bike master plans?
Yes, we looked at not just Rockville master plan, we looked at a whole bunch of master plans within the corridor. In fact, Christine can mention them, but that's okay. I'm not going to go through them tonight. As I said, we are only at concept design, but we looked at a whole host of master plans. We looked at a lot of other studies, Vision Zero and so forth. And yes, the short answer is yes, we have done.
And then we've got a question from Judy. She says, do you envision feeder?
I'm sorry, Jennifer, allow me to pause for 1 second.
Sure.
I'm sorry, I want to add something to that last question. A lot of the station access or feeders, as I call them, some of them may take place as a part of this project when we implement, you know, the BRT project, the building of the stations, the queue jumps and so forth. Some places you would see the feeders that we deem are absolutely necessary. It might be a safety issue, or we think there is really a great need for such and such station to bring people to the station. That would be implemented as a part of the project. The rest of it, whatever is we have highlighted, we have found, sifted through, and we rank them based on what we think is more urgent or is easier to do. Some of the, you know, building a sidewalk sometimes is a lot more involved than people realize. There might not be enough sufficient right-of-way, sufficient land. There might be a lot of utilities. There may be a lot of mature trees or other environmental features. We may have to build a retaining wall. So it's not an easy thing to just go drop a sidewalk, build a new sidewalk where there is none. Some of those feeder projects, station access projects, will happen at a later date as separate in kind of, if you will, like a side branch to this project. Subsequent, after, you know, there was the BRT project may open up and we will do the station access projects that we think are essential as part of the project, but some other ones will go through how we have ranked them. They will happen at later dates as they receive funding. Next question.
Well, you kind of touched on it just now, but we have a question from Judy asking about feeder access to BRT. Can you speak to a person in a subdivision must ride two different vehicles to even get to Wheaton or Rockville Metro?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. And that's the reason I call it feeder, because with the exception of, for instance, Rockville Metro, where there is, you know, parking available, not all of these BRT stations you're going to find, you know, easy parking to park your car to get to the BRT station. So most of these, you know, I anticipate people are going to reach it on foot or by their bicycles as we move forward, especially by the time that this project becomes operational. I personally believe more people are going to be using the bicycles. We are seeing it every day. But so that's one of the things we are striving to do, to make it easier, make it possible in some cases, in fact, for people within a half-mile radius of each station to be able to reach the station on foot or on bicycle. But as I said, some of those projects will be done as we do the project, as we build the stations or the queue jump lanes and so forth. And some other ones that are like deep within a subdivision, then they have to basically compete for funding with each other, because it would be kind of like beyond the scope of this thing. And some of it, as I said, some of those projects will be challenging, just as challenging as this project is. It may sound simple to an untrained person that it's just a sidewalk, it's not a widening of a travel lane, but in a lot of cases, just building a sidewalk can itself be quite challenging. So for those reasons, some of those may happen at a later date, and those projects would compete for funding with one another.
We've got one from Jeff. Will the proposals for feeder route infrastructure be discussed during upcoming events like this?
Absolutely. As I said, right now we are in what I call bird's eye view. We have just identified various locations. And once we go into preliminary design, and especially at final design, we will provide more information regarding the station access projects, the feeder projects, during those stages of the design, during, especially during final design. We will have more robust answers to present to you. What we have identified are really as viable or essential locations where we have to provide access on foot or bicycles. Thank you, everybody. And once again, my email is on the screen. If you have a question that you want to send me after the meeting, that's perfectly fine. If I don't know the answer, my team will help me and we will definitely get back to you. And I encourage you to stay tuned for as we move forward to preliminary design and final design. We will notify you of other upcoming public information meetings, open houses, and we encourage you to join and see what we have developed and provide us with your feedback. If there's no other questions, I wish everybody a good night. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.